We're about to journey through history's darkest chapters, starting with the merely horrific and descending into pure nightmare fuel. Number 10, the Blood Eagle. Vikings were known for mercy, and this punishment proves it. Reserved for the worst traitors and enemies, the Blood Eagle was as theatrical as it was brutal. The victim would be placed face down while executioners carved along both sides of the spine. The ribs were then methodically broken and bent backward, pulled apart like grotesque wings. But death wasn't the goal yet. The lungs were carefully extracted and draped over the exposed ribs, creating the appearance of bloody wings. Historical accounts claim some victims remained conscious through the entire ordeal, their screams echoing across Viking settlements as a warning to anyone considering betrayal. The practice was so horrifying that modern historians debated for years whether it actually happened or was just propaganda. Archaeological evidence from mass graves in Scandinavia suggests it was terrifyingly real. Number 9, the breaking wheel. Medieval Europe had a special fondness for public spectacle, and the breaking wheel delivered. This wasn't a quick execution. The condemned would be tied spread-eagle to a large wooden wheel, arms and legs stretched to the spokes. Executioners would then use iron bars to systematically shatter every major bone in the body, starting with the limbs and working inward. The wheel would be raised on a pole in the town square, leaving the victim to suffer for hours or even days before death finally came from dehydration or shock. In some regions, executioners were instructed to deliver the final blow to the chest only after a specific amount of time had passed. In others, mercy was shown by strangling the victim first, then breaking the corpse for display. But mercy was rare. Most victims endured the full horror while crowds gathered below, some treating it like a festival. Number 8. Lingchi. China called it death by 1,000 cuts, and the name doesn't exaggerate. This execution method was reserved for the most serious crimes, like treason and patricide. It wasn't about killing quickly. It was about prolonging death as long as possible. The executioner would make precise, shallow cuts across the body, carefully avoiding major arteries. Each cut was deliberate, measured, designed to maximize pain while preventing fatal blood loss. The process could take hours or even days, depending on the executioner's skill and the severity of the crime. Photographs from the early 1900s show this punishment was still being used in China until it was finally abolished in 1905. Witnesses described victims who remained conscious through dozens of cuts, their bodies systematically dismantled piece by piece. Some executioners were so skilled they could keep victims alive through hundreds of incisions. Number 7. Hanged, drawn, and quartered. England saved this one for high treason, and they perfected it into a multi-stage nightmare. First, the traitor would be dragged through the streets tied to a wooden frame, ensuring maximum humiliation and injury. Then came the hanging, but not to death. They'd be cut down while still conscious. That's when things got worse. The victim would be disemboweled while alive, forced to watch as their own intestines were burned in front of them. Only then would they be beheaded. But the punishment didn't end with death. The body would be divided into 4 parts, each quarter sent to a different corner of the kingdom and displayed as a warning. This wasn't just execution. It was a message written in flesh and blood. One victim in 1305 was a Scottish knight named William Wallace. After his execution, his head was dipped in tar and placed on London Bridge, where it remained for years. Number 6. The Brazen Bull. Ancient Greece gave us philosophy, democracy, and this monstrosity. A tyrant named Phalaris commissioned a bronze bull, hollow inside with a door in the side. Victims would be locked inside, and a fire lit beneath. As the metal heated, the person inside would slowly roast alive. But here's the twisted genius. The bull was designed with a complex system of tubes and stops that converted the victim's screams into sounds resembling a bull's bellowing. To observers outside, it sounded almost musical. The inventor, a man named Perilios, presented it to Phalaris as a gift. The tyrant was so impressed he decided to test it immediately. He locked Perilios inside and lit the fire, making the inventor the bull's first victim. Phalaris himself would eventually meet the same fate years later when he was overthrown. The bull was used for decades afterward, becoming one of history's most infamous torture devices. Number 5. Sawing. This punishment appeared across multiple civilizations, from ancient Rome to medieval Europe to parts of Asia. The victim would be hung upside down by their feet, then slowly sawed in half vertically, starting from the groin. The upside down position was crucial. It ensured maximum blood flow to the brain, keeping the victim conscious far longer than should be possible. Some accounts claim victims remained aware until the saw reached their chest or even their neck. The punishment was often carried out in public squares, with the sawing done slowly over hours to maximize both suffering and the deterrent effect on watching crowds. In some regions, it was specifically reserved for women accused of adultery or witchcraft. The last documented case was in the 18th century, though rumors suggest it continued in isolated areas well into the 1800s. Number 4. The Judas Cradle. Medieval torture chambers housed many devices, but few were as psychologically devastating as this. The Judas Cradle was a pyramid-shaped seat, sharpened to a point at the top. Victims would be suspended above it by ropes, then slowly lowered onto the point. The pyramid would penetrate the body, and the victim's own weight would cause them to sink deeper. But death wasn't the goal. Torturers would raise and lower the victim repeatedly, sometimes for days. The device was rarely cleaned, meaning infections were almost guaranteed. Victims who survived the initial torture often died from sepsis days later. The psychological torture was just as severe. Victims could see the device waiting below them, knowing exactly what was coming. Some confessed to crimes they didn't commit just to avoid it. Others went mad before the torture even began. The device remained in use across Europe until the late 1700s. Number 3. Necklacing. This one is disturbingly recent. During South African apartheid and its aftermath, necklacing became a form of extrajudicial execution. A rubber tire would be forced over the victim's chest and arms, pinning them. The tire would then be filled with gasoline and set on fire. The rubber would melt slowly, sticking to skin and burning at extreme temperatures. Victims could survive for up to 20 minutes, unable to escape or extinguish the flames. What makes this particularly horrifying is that it was often carried out by mobs in public, sometimes broadcast on television. The practice was used against suspected informers, criminals, and political opponents. It continued sporadically into the 1990s and has been reported in other African nations since. The psychological impact on communities that witness these executions is still being studied by trauma researchers today. Number 2. Scaphism. Ancient Persia created something that sounds impossible, yet multiple historical sources confirm it happened. The victim would be trapped between two boats or hollowed logs, with only their head, hands, and feet exposed. They'd be force-fed milk and honey until they developed severe diarrhea. Then more milk and honey would be poured over their exposed body parts. The victim would be left floating on a stagnant pond under the desert sun. The combination of sun exposure, their own waste, and the sweet coating would attract every insect imaginable. Flies would lay eggs in the waste. Maggots would begin feeding on the victim while they were still alive. Wasps and bees would swarm the honey. The force feeding would continue daily, ensuring the victim stayed alive as long as possible. One account describes a victim surviving 17 days, his body becoming a living hive of insects and larvae. By the end, witnesses claimed you couldn't see his skin beneath the mass of insects. Number 1. The Oubliette. The name means to forget in French, and that's exactly what happened. These were dungeons designed not for imprisonment, but for erasure. A narrow shaft would drop into a small chamber, often too small to stand or lie down in. Prisoners would be thrown in and the entrance sealed. No trial, no execution, just forgotten. Some oubliettes were discovered centuries later with dozens of skeletons inside, still wearing the remnants of their clothes. What makes this the worst is the psychological torture. Unlike other punishments that ended in hours or days, oubliette victims could survive for weeks, sitting in total darkness, surrounded by the bones of previous victims, slowly dying of thirst and starvation. Some castles built oubliettes near great halls, so prisoners could hear feasts and celebrations above them. A constant reminder of the life they'd never return to. In Leap Castle, Ireland, workers renovating in 1900 discovered an oubliette so packed with skeletons it took 3 cartloads to remove them all. Many showed signs of trying to claw their way out, their finger bones worn down to nothing against the stone walls.